Mock Draft Monday on a Tuesday? Yeah, I really wanted to wait to see what the Raiders were going to do. Monday Night Football, the Giants were in that number one spot. And honestly, it doesn't really change a whole lot because the draft is pretty much going to start the way it always does for me. Welcome to the channel, by the way. If you're new, hit that subscribe button. I'm going to start with Shedeur Sanders. There are some connections there with him and the Raiders, but also I do think he's the best quarterback in the draft. The Raiders are picking at number one overall. They desperately need a quarterback. Enter Shedeur Sanders. Now, again, this is not a great quarterback class, but I think when you're picking at the top of the board, how many times do you have a chance to take one of the top QBs in the draft? And we just see teams take swings on QBs, right? And I think the Giants are going to be in that same boat. I think Cam Ward will be a Giant in this scenario. Similar to Shedeur, he holds the ball for too long, but he has some great playmaking ability. He is a great improviser. He can make some special plays, as I continue to say. It's just, is that going to work at the pro level? The pro level, got to be able to get the ball out on time and obviously on target. Sometimes hero ball doesn't necessarily work too much unless, you're one of the actual top QBs in the league, like we've seen with Patrick Mahomes for years now. Josh Allen, Lamar, some of these guys. Patriots at number 3. Still think I'm going to go Travis Hunter here. I think he's the best player in the draft. I almost made a dedicated video talking about the Heisman results just because, especially on Twitter, if you follow me down there, twitter.com/BengalYouTube in the description. The Heisman conversation has been so toxic, and people just don't respect how good of a player Travis Hunter is. They have no idea, it seems. Because what he is doing, or what he did, is unbelievable and truly never been seen before. It's not comparable to Shaq Thompson or Miles Jack. Maybe more so to Champ Bailey, but it's still on another level. It's above what Gamble was doing at Ohio State in the early 2000s. It's certainly above what Charles Woodson was doing. Somebody said one time, I guess, that Travis Hunter wasn't that good of a corner, and then everyone was like, all right, I guess that's true. And they're just starting to say that. They're, oh, he's not a good receiver or a corner. He's just slightly above average at both. No, he's actually one of the best DBs in the nation. It's mind-blowing he was not a Thorpe Award finalist, but those voters are consistently not very good. It's weird. They always yield towards the upperclassmen, it would appear, which I don't care in this case. Jahdae Barron won it. Hook him. And he was amazing this year. Very, statistically amazing. But Travis Hunter is a phenomenal cornerback prospect. And the fact that he's doing that while also winning the Biletnikoff at wide receiver, which some people think it should have been Nick Nash from San Jose State. I mean, I almost feel like that in itself is enough of a reason why he shouldn't have won it. At San Jose State. This is another conversation for another time. I respect that he won the Triple Crown. This is not the first time we've seen a Group of 5 player put up very good numbers and not win. And it wasn't that great of a year for wide receivers, to be honest. It was down, and that's kind of why Travis Hunter comes out and wins it. I don't think he's the best receiver in college football, but I do think he's very good. Ended up putting up pretty good numbers, right? So he was definitely in play to win it. It was either going to be him probably or Teteroa McMillan. I probably lean towards Jeremiah Smith being the best receiver in college football, but his numbers weren't good enough to win that type of an award, and he was only a true freshman, so it was never going to happen. But anyway, Travis Hunter is a truly generational player, and he's going to be the first non-quarterback off the board, I would expect. And that's why he's going at number 3 to New England. At number 4, going Will Johnson. I know I've done this before, but you look at the Jags here, and this is potentially, maybe Will Campbell or Kelvin Banks if they want to go O-line. But I think Will Johnson is just one of the best players in the draft. The top 2 or 3 corners are really good. Outside of that, there's a bit of a drop-off, in my opinion, where you're kind of more betting on traits and the injury stuff with Morrison. But Will Johnson is a very, very good prospect with NFL size. You look at the Jaguars, not only their depth at corner, but the top-end talent. Outside of Tyson Campbell, it's really not especially good. Panthers at 5. I'm going to keep going Abdul Carter here. I think he's just probably going to be the first edge rusher off the board, and that's just, it makes a ton of sense for Carolina. They're trying to stockpile talent. The offensive side of the ball is starting to look better. Bryce Young is improving, still not perfect, but the offense is starting to look better. Their defense is still absolutely atrocious, but they're not in line to pick number 1 anymore. They're starting to pick up a couple of wins and maybe stringing something together, even looking better in losses, which I think is something, right? You want to win games, okay? But I mean, when you can go toe-to-toe with the Eagles a couple of weeks ago, right? Your expectations are so low right now as a Carolina fan that I think just competing against some of these good teams is, cause for not celebration necessarily, but something to build upon, looking forward with excitement to the future, and maybe Abdul Carter can help transform that defense. He's a really athletic player that's still transitioning to being a full-time edge, and he's getting better seemingly every week. Tennessee at 6. So I've gone O-line, I've gone wide receiver here, I've even gone quarterback. The quarterback situation for Tennessee is bizarre because Mason Rudolph is going to start this week. I don't know why. I know Will Levis has not played especially well. I get it, but his ceiling is so much higher. He actually has potential. We know what Mason Rudolph is. Levis has had flashes of being a very decent-looking quarterback and then has mostly played really badly. It is a very interesting situation, but there just are no quarterbacks to take. Maybe Jalen Milroe, right? I don't think Carson Becker, Quinn Ewers, or somebody wanted me to put Will Howard in the first round. I can't get behind that. Dylan Gabriel, Curtis Rourke, these guys are not going to be first-round picks. So maybe we pivot towards the other side of the football and try to improve that pass rush. And a player that's really coming on strong this year has been Georgia's Jalen Walker. Now, I know Tennessee's actually drafted a linebacker out of Georgia before, DeAndre Walker, with the same last name. In the 5th round, I don't even think he ended up making the team. But Jalen Walker, it's a weird parallel to draw, but he is a very fun player. He can play off the ball, but he is also a really, really good blitzer. And I think as someone that can potentially play off the ball when you need him to, but also be kind of like that Abdul Carter transition to more of a full-time edge, I think you have something there. Now, he's a little bit small, potentially to be a full-time edge, depending on the system. Like, this is not going to be, your 4-3 defensive end. But in a team that's running a 3-4, Jalen Walker is going to be a pretty good fit as someone that can be a spot dropper, somebody that can rush the passer, and can be a really big impact player. I mean, he has been a game wrecker at times this season. I think that could be a top 10 pick. And I think if not him, you want maybe a bigger body. Look, no further than his teammate at Georgia and Michael Williams. If you're playing for more of the supersized athletic freak at 6'5", 265, Michael Williams is, a very, very fun player, and we'll have to see where he goes here in the near future. Cleveland Browns at number 7. I'm going Kelvin Banks. I've gone a number of different spots here for Cleveland recently, but I'm going to go Kelvin Banks. Jed Wills is a free agent, and I think that opens up the door, obviously, for a first-round tackle. Kelvin Banks Jr. has enjoyed a really good season. The Georgia pass rushers caused some problems, but how much of that is Kelvin Banks versus Quinn Ewers and not being able to step up in the pocket and not being able to get rid of the football at times? That's a whole nother conversation. But Kelvin Banks Jr. just won the Outland for best overall lineman in the country, and I think that could warrant being a top 10 selection. We've, of course, talked about him in that range now for a while, and Cleveland could be a team potentially taking him. At number 8, I pretty much go Mason Graham to the Jets like every time because he keeps falling. I haven't been able to find a great spot for him, and maybe it could be Jacksonville or even New England, but probably Carolina. Maybe you consider it with the Browns, but probably not, in my opinion. The Jets just seem like a likely landing spot if they're going to be picking at 8. I know they have needs on the offensive side of the ball, but Mason Graham is a top 5 or 10 player in the draft very comfortably and goes here at number 8 to a Jets team that really could use a bunch of upgrades all over the place. This is a team that constantly feels like they're in limbo of, okay, maybe something this year. Nope, no, not anything again. It's weird. But Mason Graham maybe can help out that pass rush. That's a dynamic duo of Quinnen Williams and Mason Graham now on the defensive interior. Cleveland Browns are off the clock, as are the Jets. His at C is for the Chicago Bears. Why did I say Cleveland? The world will never know. Going Will Campbell. I know this is getting old probably, but what's getting old is Caleb Williams being under pressure immediately every play. Their offensive line has been struggling, especially on the interior. I think Will Campbell profiles more as a guard than a tackle. We've talked about that a lot this year. I think maybe depending on the team, they try him out at tackle to start. The tape's pretty good. We talked about it before, but the shorter arms and the struggles with speed off the edge, I think could potentially move him inside where, yes, things happen a little bit faster, but you're not going to be worried about a speed rush off the edge on an island against a really bendy NFL pass rusher. It's not really going to happen on the interior. So Will Campbell, somebody that I think is a huge upgrade. He is arguably the best offensive lineman in the class, but just probably is going to play guard. At number 10, have the Saints going Teteroa McMillan. I really thought this could be a defensive lineman for a while. I ended up redoing this and giving them Teteroa McMillan at number 10. Just look at their receiving core. I think they could use a big body, somebody that can be reliable. And I think Teteroa McMillan has the chops to end up being a top 10 pick. I'm not especially ecstatic about this receiver class. However, he is definitely a good player. And for the Saints, I just think you could use some more weapons in that offense, in that arsenal, right? And I think that you've got some speed guys. You got some deep threats. Talk about a healthy Rashid Shaheed and Chris Olave. But they're missing that Michael Thomas type player, right? With the size, the chain moving ability. Not saying Teteroa McMillan is Michael Thomas, but you're missing that big body and you're missing that player like Michael Thomas that made this offense so good at times in the past. Teteroa McMillan to the Saints at number 10. Dolphins at 11. Going Malachi Starks. I think he's a top 5 or 10 player in the draft, just like Mason Graham. Ends up going just outside of the top 10. Dolphins have a lot of things they could consider here, but you're likely losing Javon Holland to free agency. This is just a replacement, and it's a really, really good replacement at that. It's weird for the Dolphins, much like the 49ers. I feel like they're a team that needs to be more physical, especially in the trenches. And a safety doesn't necessarily help with that, but losing an all-pro caliber safety to free agency, that's going to be a big hole in the secondary. I think you're probably looking to replace that with Malachi Starks, and I think that's a pretty good replacement to have. As things get a little bit more interesting with Indianapolis at 12, it might seem a bit early. He actually received a Heisman first place vote, if I'm not mistaken. We're going to the tight end room and taking Tyler Warren. I've talked about this before. I keep making this pick for Indianapolis. I think it makes a ton of sense. It's a really great influx of talent to the offense. They're lacking a top-tier tight end for sure. And I think, for Anthony Richardson that struggles to complete passes, getting him a safety blanket, like Tyler Warren could be really, really good for his development. You see a lot of these quarterbacks that end up really meshing with a great tight end. And, we saw it with, for so many years with guys like Drew Brees, whether that was Jimmy Graham. I think there was some crossover there, of course, with Antonio Gates. But the tight end consistently, look at Brady and Gronk and Gronk's teammate that is no longer with us. Is an interesting way to describe Aaron Hernandez. But the tight end can be a really, really big part of an offense. And you even saw that in Indianapolis with Peyton Manning and Dallas Clark. Not saying Tyler Warren is Dallas Clark, but at 6'6", 260, with the type of year that he had, I think this is a guy that probably does end up finding a spot inside the top 20 to a team like Indianapolis or maybe even Los Angeles with the Chargers, and is a really, really nice addition to that group that can really, hopefully, if you were the Colts, help the development of an Anthony Richardson. Cincinnati Bengals at number 13. The defense is so poor. It really is, and that's a huge part of why the Bengals are being held back. This is a team that I think, with Joe Burrow and with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, of course, this is a team that you expect to be picking more like 23 or lower compared to 13 or even potentially higher. So you got to improve that defense. It's such a bad group, and I think a good way to do that is by improving the pass rush. And I'm going Mykel Williams here. He's a guy that could end up in the top 10. He's got great potential. He has, at times, been a game wrecker for Georgia. This is a guy that can be one of the top pass rushers in this draft. just struggled with injury a little bit so far this year. And, I mean, definitely saw it against Texas. Again, how much of that was Quinn Ewers versus, Kelvin Banks in some of these spots. Cam Williams is still raw for sure at right tackle, but he's someone that I think ends up being a first-round pick. Teams just bet on potential and trait, and you're not going to find much more of that than with Georgia's Michael Williams. The Bengals desperately need to improve their pass rush and their secondary and their linebacking core, and no, that's every level of the defense. At number 14, Ashton Jeanty. The Cowboys just makes way too much sense. Even if you like what Rico Dowdle's been doing lately, he's going to be like 28, I think, 27, 28. Getting another running back in the mix, a good young running back, probably the best one in this draft, I think we can agree on. And to a team that has an unbelievable attachment to Boise State. There's more Boise State representation on the Cowboys over the past decade than with any other team in the league, and maybe every other team in the league combined. There are so many different examples, whether that's with Kellen Moore as a coach or DeMarcus Lawrence as a player. I mean, Darian Thompson ended up on the Cowboys. Leighton Vander Esch was a first-round pick out of Boise State. Cedric Wilson, Orlando Scandrick, maybe not in the past 10 years, but he was a Cowboy. If there's a Boise State player going to any team in the draft, it just is the Cowboys. I don't know how it ends up being the case every single time, but the stars align. Jeanty's available at 14, and the Cowboys pull the trigger, get one of the top 10 players in the draft probably. At number 15, got the San Francisco 49ers. I'm going to continue to hype up Derek Harmon. He's one of the best interior defensive linemen in this draft. He's still rated very low on the PFF big board. I got to talk to Trevor about that, see what he doesn't necessarily like about Derek Harmon, or maybe hasn't got into the process enough to see Derek Harmon, although I doubt that. He is plugged in as it gets. But Derek Harmon, to me, is one of the best interior defensive linemen in this draft. He's a great pass rusher on the interior. Has been a big reason why the Oregon defense has been as good as it has been this season. He's a great player, and just like we talked about earlier with Miami, this is a team that needs to get more physical and better in the trenches. Harmon helps you do that on the defensive side of the ball, and maybe you come back in round 2 and grab a guard or a tackle, depending on who's available. Falcons at 16. I continue to preach pass rush, pass rush, pass rush with the Falcons. I'm not going to belabor this point. It's just got to be somebody that can actually impact the opposing team's quarterback. And for Shamar Stewart at 6'6", 290, this is someone that can line up at multiple different alignments on the defensive line. I think that's going to be more often at the 5 tech or maybe a true edge versus playing a 3 tech. But I think he can do that if you need. You're looking at 3rd and long, maybe say, hey, go in at the 3 and make an impact over the guard, right? I think that's, or next to the guard if you want to be specific about the alignment. But I think that's somebody that can be a top, 20 pick in this draft easily. And for the Falcons, it just ends up being a pretty good fit. Arizona Cardinals at 17. So I've gone Walter Nolan here before, but I'm going to go Kenneth Grant this time around. He is a really athletic player for his size, and he's pretty big at 6'3", 340. And for the Cardinals, they need to improve their defensive line. It's not necessarily just interior, but it is. But edge is still in the conversation as well, of course. Just think this is a good fit overall for Arizona, and the Cardinals get a national champion on the defensive line, bring in some of that winning culture. At number 18, Seattle Seahawks. This is a weird one because they've dealt with some injuries, but I'm going to go Cam Williams here. Doesn't necessarily have to start right away. I know guard is a need for Seattle as well. Cameron Williams is someone with big-time potential. Again, we talk about it with, Michael Williams and a number of these players, especially these tackles, right? Few of these guys, like Ariante Ursary, right? Few of these guys are polished products at this point, but, and maybe the most polished one, by the way, is Josh Simmons, but injury kind of makes his projection a little bit weird. But teams draft on traits and potential. Cameron Williams ends up in the top 20. Does he have top 20 tape? Not necessarily, but does a team see a future where they can mold him into, a Pro Bowl or All-Pro type tackle? Maybe they do. And he goes number 18, which is actually very similar to where they were last year when they took Texas teammate Byron Murphy. think maybe that was at 16, something in this range. Chargers at 19, going Luther Burden. He's still available. The Chargers need more playmakers on offense. Burden's one of the best in the draft. Bucks at 20. And this, to me, is a perfect fit. It's juice off the edge, and that's James Pierce. Probably has the most explosive first step of any edge in this draft. Probably any player, right? There's not an interior defensive player with more juice than James Pierce. Juice Pierce would be a sick nickname, by the way. But he is the pick here at number 20. The Bucks are just searching for an improved pass rush, post Shaq Barrett. I think James Pierce probably helps you in that regard. Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, who knows what his future holds, but even if he can develop and you hold on to him, he's just one guy. You need not only at least 2 good edge rushers, but a rotation. Enter James Pierce. Rams at 21, going Ariante Ursary. Again, there's a lot of potential here. Not exactly the most polished, but at this size, with his movement abilities, that's a first-round pick. Ariante Ursary to Los Angeles as you continue to try and win now. We'll have to see what the immediate and then long-term future of the Rams looks like, but Ursary, I think, is a solid selection there. At 22, I've been all over Savone Revel. I'm mixing it up today, and that's kind of the theme of some of these picks so far. We're going to go to the offensive line. We're going to go Josh Simmons. His tape was as good as any tackle in this class this year before injury. I saw a few games of his and was very, very impressed. He just doesn't get beat, right? And I think that is also the profile of somebody that can end up going in the first round. Injury ends his season. Should be back by training camp, I would imagine. But his tape was very, very good. I think he was definitely in line to be one of the first tackles off the board, really, and maybe even a top 10 pick or higher. Well, you can't be higher than the top 10 pick. Number 1 is a top 10 pick, but he could have been, maybe he would even been in the top 5 is kind of more of my point there. Broncos at 23. Emeka Egbuka is my new favorite pick there. You just need more reliable pass catchers, and Egbuka is somebody that can dominate in the slot. I think makes a lot of sense at 23. He's not the same player as Jackson Smith and Jigba, but I think he can do a similar thing there for Denver to what, Smith and Jigba has offered Seattle. Around the same range in the draft as well. Ravens at 24. Really thought this was going to be Savone Revel for me, but that pass rush has just been disappointing. Nick Scorton's available at 24, and he joins a Baltimore defense that, again, needs to impact opposing quarterbacks more than they're doing right now. I think you're not exactly stoked on what Owe or Ajabo, when healthy, has offered you. Owe obviously getting a little bit more run than David Ajabo there, but I think you're pretty disappointed overall with your pass rush, and I think that's also a big reason why their secondary's been cooked this year. They've got some playmakers in the secondary. I mean, you look at Kyle Hamilton and Marlon Humphrey and the rookie Nate Wiggins. But, those guys can only cover for so long. A pass rush that forces the ball out early makes a defense way better. Texans at 25, going Walter Nolan. Again, we talk about potential. I think he could go a lot higher than this. But he's got, again, about as much potential as anybody you're going to find in this draft, especially in this range. Nolan's somebody that has been dominant at times, has shown flashes, former top recruit in the nation, or number 2, depending on where you look, right next to Travis Hunter. And I think that's for good reason. This is somebody with very solid size and very good athleticism that's only developing as a player. So for a Texans defense that's only aging on the defensive line, well, especially on the interior, but some of those contract situations as well, guys are not locked down long term. Walter Nolan helps you out, but also gets you, younger and more team control as well. So feels like a pretty good fit. With the Pittsburgh Steelers, I have been receiver. Here's the reality also is that, and I've said this as I've gone receiver, whether that's been Emeka Egbuka or Isaiah Bond, the receiver position is not necessarily one that the Steelers seem to value very highly. They don't necessarily look to draft one in the first round all the time, right? Or ever. Much like Green Bay. What if it's not a receiver? I'm going to go back to doing what I've done already. I gave the Steelers Malachi Starks, and they've complained about it. He's off the board, right? Enter Nick Emanwari from South Carolina. He is a dog. You watch him, he seems like a Steeler. We have Deshaun Elliott. Listen, nobody loves Deshaun Elliott more than I do. Tremendous player at Texas. Hook him. However, his final year under contract is 2025. You cannot guarantee that you retain him, even if you want to. He's like 28 at this point, and that's kind of where you start to see some of these guys fall off a little bit. That's where athleticism starts to dip a little bit, right? And especially for a DB, a little bit less so at safety, right? But especially for a DB, athleticism is pretty important. So are instincts. Minkah Fitzpatrick's a tremendous player, but something about Nicky Manwari is I feel like he offers you a tremendous amount of versatility because he can play at the back end of the secondary at a really, really good level. But at 6'3", close to 230, 330 be insane. At close to 230, he's someone that can play an impact in the box. He's somebody that is athletic enough to play over the top. He is a tremendous player. It's just, and I've wanted to put him in the first round now for a couple weeks, and I've said that in my past couple of videos. It is hard to find a spot for a safety with some of these teams given their other needs. And I know Pittsburgh, you're looking for maybe even a tackle more than a receiver, but you need both of those things. Manwari, I think, offers you versatility, and overall, he's just a great player. He's big, physical, and athletic. Very good in coverage. I mean, this is someone that has rare size and athleticism that I think could end up being a first-round pick because of that versatility. And I know the Steelers, we don't need him. But you kind of do a little bit. You kind of do. I don't know why it seems so crazy. People don't, a lot of times, seem to understand how contracts work. You just can't guarantee that a player is going to be back. You know, I don't think the Steelers would necessarily look to even franchise tag Deshaun Elliott after next season. And in mock drafts, we don't assume anything. If a player has an expiring contract or is aging, you look to potentially find a replacement. Manwari would be under contract for 4 years, guaranteed, plus a 5th-year option, and is way younger than what they have currently at safety. And again, I like that versatility. I think this is a really good fit. I feel like he feels like a Steeler as I keep accidentally right-clicking. Real professional, real pros pro. Packers at 27. This feels like a good spot to get Savone Revel off the board. He's a really, really talented player. Great size, great athleticism. I think he's going to be a commander, but in the event that they pass on him to go with, a tackle maybe, Revel falls down the board a little bit, and he goes to Green Bay that desperately needs a corner. And I feel like he's a pretty good fit for Green Bay as well. You look at Halfley coming in, I think he fits the mold of what you're looking for at corner, and he's just a modern NFL-type corner. He's got size and speed, and I think that's the type of guy that ends up going high in the draft, even after an injury. Minnesota Vikings, here at 28. I am going with running back Caleb Johnson from Iowa. I think there's a chance he ends up being a first-round pick. It's a stacked running back class. There's no two ways about it. So many different players here that are going to go in the top 100 that are really, really good players. And Caleb Johnson will be one of those guys. Now, is that at 28? Is it at 48? It's tough to know where a running back's going to go. But in terms of talent, he's one of the best running backs in the draft. Absolutely no question. It's a good fit in Minnesota. Buffalo at 29. I did this last week. No, I didn't. I've changed this. I was originally going to go Jahad Campbell. People question it, but he's someone that can do a lot of different things for you. Again, versatility is valuable. And now we're going to go maybe more of a true edge. However, Landon Jackson, much like some of the other pass rushers in this draft, are bigger than your typical edge. He's 6'7", 280. So that could be someone that, again, can play 5-tech. Can maybe even rush wider outside than that. And we've seen that at Arkansas. He is a big, athletic freak, right? Long arms. We love it on the defensive line. We love it really on the offensive line. Anything in the trenches, but corner too. I mean, long arms are valuable in the NFL. Landon Jackson, certainly no shortage of that. And for the Buffalo Bills, you got some aging talent. Von Miller. Landon Jackson can not only be a rotational player, but a long-term solution off the edge for, a defense that has been good under Sean McDermott, but could get even better with the addition of a player maybe like Landon Jackson. Philadelphia at 30. This, for me, will be Jahad Campbell. First linebacker off the board, but he's not just an off-ball linebacker. He was recruited as an edge. He's 6'3", 245. Can come off the edge for Alabama. Has been good in that role at times. He's a great blitzer, whether that's up the middle. And he can also drop into coverage. I think Philadelphia just looking for more talent. And their defense is good, but you need more on the edge. You could also potentially even use a linebacker. And Jahad Campbell might even check off multiple boxes there for you. He's a really talented player. Detroit at 31. Going to go with Arizona tackle / guard, Jonas Avainaya. Says tackle, right? He'd be playing guard in this scenario for the future. Yes, you have Taylor Decker. You have arguably the best true tackle in the league. And then when I say true tackle, I mean, either left or right. Best overall tackle in Penei Sewell. In the conversation for best right tackle, with Tristan Wirfs, moving around, I feel like it becomes pretty clear he's the best right tackle. But Jonas Avainaya will play guard. I know people will not look and see, tackle. Be playing guard in this scenario. And I just look at the aging players on the interior offensive line, the injury history, the contracts. It makes sense, I think, to at least consider upgrading the interior of that O-line. So Avainaya in the past has been very good at guard. And then the Chiefs at 32. Also, I'm doing something that people have complained about before, and I don't really care. I'm going to do it again. I'm going to go Colston Loveland. He is better than the number 32 overall player in this draft, probably. And I know the Chiefs don't necessarily need tight end. Because, yes, beyond Travis Kelce, who's 35, you do have some decent options for the future, whether that's Jared Wiley, whether that's somebody else, right? You have some options there. I want to call him Noah Drake, but it's not his name. He went to Duke. Why am I blanking? Noah Drake, Noah Gray. I don't know why I wanted to say Drake. I knew it wasn't right. I think just because he went to Duke, it was in my head. It was weird. Anyway, bit of brain fog here. That's not entirely unusual. But Loveland isn't just a tight end. He's not really that much of an inline guy. He's someone that I think will make more of an impact as a true wide receiver. And I think that's worked so well for the Chiefs in the past. I think Loveland can play in the slot. They need more reliable pass catchers. And at this point in the draft, with, of course, the top 2 wide receivers off the board and Emeka Egbuka, do you want to take another speed receiver out of Texas in Isaiah Bond? Are you going to take Xavier Restrepo here? I don't necessarily think so. I think Loveland just ends up being the best option for pass catchers. And I've gone tackle all day here. Could be something else. But going back to the pass catching route with Colston Loveland gives you a different option. Think about when the Bills took Dalton Kincaid. They have Dawson Knox. They don't need a tight end, but it's not just a tight end, right? Loveland is a big power slot type receiver. And ignore tight end. This is a guy that's going to do most of his impact on a game as a receiver. So that is the Mock Draft Monday on Tuesday. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. I'm sure you didn't. And I will see you in the next one. Take it easy.